Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a dining room so fancy, so glittering, so outrageously over the top that for a moment you might think you've walked into a Michelin star restaurant. But don't worry, give it 5 minutes and the smell alone will remind you that Regency Aristocrats weren't serving Instagram-worthy plates. They were serving things that were, well, let's call them culinary war crimes with decorative garnishes. Because tonight, we're diving fork first into what these people actually ate. Not the Jane Austen fantasy version where everyone politely nibbles cake while discussing marriage prospects, but the real, messy, smelly, deeply questionable foods that the upper crust of the early 1800s proudly devoured while wearing tiny silk shoes and bragging about their horses. Before we go any further, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this strange little corner of the internet where we explore historical stories you definitely didn't ask for. And if this topic was your suggestion, thank you for sending it in. Some of the best episodes come from your ideas. Feel free to leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what ungodly hour it is. Somewhere out there it's 2 a.m. and someone is quietly questioning their life choices while learning about Regency dinners. Now go ahead and dim the lights. Turn on a fan for that soft, cozy hum. Crawl under your blankets and get comfortable. Protect those toes. A Regency-era footman would absolutely judge them. And let's pause for a moment. Have you ever wondered, what did aristocrats serve at those massive dinners that required 18 forks and a footman specifically assigned to hold your soup spoon? Were their meals actually delicious, or were they just expensive piles of regret wrapped in pastry? What did people do when the jellied fish course started wobbling at them threateningly? Did anyone actually enjoy calf's head pudding, or were they all lying to maintain social status? And how exactly did you politely decline a dish that looked like it crawled onto the plate voluntarily? Because congratulations, you've just woken up in the Regency era. You're seated at a 5-hour aristocratic dinner. The candles are hot, the wigs are powdered, and a servant is approaching with something that still has eyes. Good luck. You receive a stiff, cream-coloured invitation sealed with enough wax to waterproof a canoe. It's your first clue that Regency dining isn't just eating, it's performance art mixed with light social terror. As you step into the candlelit dining room, you're already sweating, because the aroma in the air suggests someone boiled a shoe earlier. Let's talk about entrances, because in the Regency world, walking into a dinner is less, oh hey, dinner time, and more. Congratulations, you're now on stage. The moment the butler announces your name, every powdered head turns toward you like owls judging your fashion choices. You try to glide in gracefully, but your shoes make a squeak that echoes off the marble floors like a distressed mouse. Perfect. Flawless. Exactly the kind of subtle elegance Austen novels neglect to mention. You glance around, taking in the scene. The entire room glitters with chandeliers, mirrors, candelabras, and more silverware than your brain can process. The tablecloth is so crisp it could cut you. The aristocrats perched around the edges of the room stare at you with polite curiosity, as if you're a new type of exotic plant they aren't sure how to water. Then the smells hit you again. It's a layered scent, a base note of boiled cabbage, a strong middle note of fish that died bravely, and a high, drifting note of perfume that could legally be classified as a weapon. You breathe shallowly. Breathing too deeply feels risky. What if some microscopic Regency essence lodges itself in your lungs and never leaves? A footman materializes beside you, silent as a Victorian ghost. He informs you that the dinner will be served momentarily, which in Regency language means any time in the next 2 hours. You nod as if you understand the customs. You absolutely do not. You're guided toward the drawing room where guests mingle before the meal. This is where the real danger is, polite conversation. A lady in a dress the size of a small tent asks if you enjoyed the season. You have no idea what season she means. Winter? Fig season? Allergy season? You smile vaguely and say, Oh yes, quite, which is Regency survival code for please don't ask for details. A gentleman approaches holding a glass of something fizzy and suspiciously yellow. He tells you it's lemonade, but his tone implies the lemons have been through a lot. You accept the drink anyway because refusing anything in Regency society is roughly equivalent to slapping a duke. As you sip the beverage, sour, flat, confused, you scan the room. Everywhere look, people are doing the same thing, pretending not to be starving while waiting for the dinner gong. Because even though these people eat enough courses to fuel a Viking raid, they still won't touch a single bite before the meal officially begins. Etiquette demands suffering. Finally the gong sounds. It's deep, resonant, the kind of vibration that announces, prepare yourself mentally and physically. Guests begin filing toward the dining room in assigned order. Highest rank first, minor nobility next, and you somewhere in the region labelled, we're not sure where they came from, but let's be polite. You take your seat and freeze. The place setting in front of you looks like someone dumped the contents of a silverware museum onto your plate. There are forks for things you can't name, tiny spoons, curved knives, a glass shaped like it's judging you. You have the sinking realization that dinner hasn't even started yet and you're already failing spectacularly. But there's no turning back now. The candles flicker, the servants glide forward with their trays, and you, trembling delicately in your borrowed finery, prepare for the full Regency experience. 5 hours of culinary confusion, polite terror, and dishes that dare you to question your will to live. You wanted history. Congratulations, you've arrived. You sit down and discover more silverware than your entire modern kitchen owns. There are forks for fish, forks for salad, forks for mystery purposes no one will explain. You stare at them like you're defusing a bomb, praying someone else makes the first move. For a moment, all you can do is blink at the table like you've walked into an exam you forgot to study for. Regency aristocrats treat forks the way modern people treat Wi-Fi routers. No one fully understands how they work, but everyone pretends they do. You try to subtly count them, but the more you look, the more they seem to multiply, breeding under candlelight like metallic rabbits. A footman glides past, silent, serene, and absolutely judging you. He sets another fork near your plate. Another. You briefly consider asking him if this is a prank, but Regency footmen do not joke. They simply observe your suffering with gentle, well-trained eyes. You remind yourself to breathe. Slow, shallow breaths. Panicking will only draw attention, and in this dining room, attention is the enemy. Every person here was raised on etiquette manuals thick enough to stun an ox. You once used a fork to open a package. You peek to your left. A duchess sits with perfect posture, her hand resting lightly near her silverware like she's posing for a portrait titled, Woman Who Has Never Feared a Fork. She picks up a delicate utensil with the confidence of someone who grew up practicing this skill on biscuits, worth more than your rent. You follow her lead, choosing the outermost fork. This feels safe, logical, scientifically sound, but immediately doubts Bloom. What if she's left-handed? What if this is a trap? What if Regency society uses reverse utensil sequencing because of course they would? You freeze again, smiling faintly as if everything is perfectly fine. It is not. You haven't even made physical contact with food yet, and already the dining experience feels like an escape room designed by a particularly fussy grandmother. A servant approaches with the first course, soup, innocent, harmless, liquid comfort, except you suddenly realize there are also 3 spoons at your disposal, each shaped with subtle differences that imply moral consequences for choosing the wrong one. You pretend to adjust your napkin in order to steal another glance. The Duchess reaches for a rounded spoon with a delicate twist at the handle. You mimic her, hoping no one notices the sheer panic in your eyes. The moment your spoon hits the soup, You feel like you've passed the first test in a secret society built entirely around avoiding embarrassment. But the relief is short-lived. As dishes continue to arrive, the utensil situation escalates. One course demands a small fork shaped like someone shrunk a garden rake. Another requires a blunt paddle-like implement that looks like a tiny canoe oar. At one point, you swear you're handed something that could legally qualify as a dental tool. You're sweating now, lightly, glamorously, but sweating nonetheless. Eating should not require this many decisions. It's like every bite is a new opportunity to commit a deeply offensive faux pas. Meanwhile, around you, the aristocrats twirl and tap their utensils like conducting an orchestra of silent judgment. And just when you think you've finally adapted, when you're beginning to understand the rhythm of fork to plate to mouth, someone places a bone-handled implement beside your dish. It looks like something stolen from an archaeological dig. You look at it. It looks at you. Neither of you understands your relationship. Eventually you surrender to the experience. You decide you will simply pick up whatever object seems least likely to injure you or disrupt the geopolitical balance of the table. If anyone gasps, you'll pretend you are making an avant-garde artistic statement. Because navigating Regency forks isn't about mastery, it's about survival. Quiet, dignified, slightly sweaty survival. After all, you didn't choose the fork life. The fork life chose you. The first dish arrives. A pale, watery broth that smells faintly like someone apologized into a pot. Soup in the Regency era isn't meant to taste good. It's meant to remind you that subtlety was considered a flavour. You stare down at the bowl, unsure whether to sip it, analyse it, or send it a sympathy card. The surface shimmers under candlelight, reflecting the room's chandeliers like a tiny judgmental pond. Around you, aristocrats lift their spoons with the grace of swans performing synchronized ballet. You lift yours with the enthusiasm of someone approaching a medical experiment. You take your first sip. It's warm. It's thin. It tastes like water that briefly shook hands with a chicken. The aristocrats nod approvingly, as though the broth has offered a philosophical insight. You try to mimic their expression, a serene, contemplative look that communicates, "Ah yes, I absolutely understand why this liquid exists." But inside you're thinking, this is just hot disappointment. Still, you keep going, because manners require it. Regency society believes soup is the opening act of the culinary opera, elegant, refined, designed to ease you into the chaos of the upcoming courses. In reality, it's a test, a silent assessment of your ability to maintain composure while drinking flavoured humidity. You glance sideways. The Duchess blows gently on her spoonful, as if coaxing it toward excellence. The gentleman beside her rotates his wrist in a flourish that suggests he has been practicing soup drinking since infancy. A baronet at the far end of the table takes dainty sips so small you wonder if he's actually ingesting anything at all. You try to follow their lead, but your spoon clanks against the bowl loudly, echoing through the chamber like a cannon blast. A few heads turn. You offer a polite smile that says, "Yes, I did that. Please erase me from memory." The broth continues to steam, sending up little wisps of vapour that smell faintly of boiled garden. There's a ghost of a vegetable in it, onion, parsnip, a carrot that lost the will to live. Hard to tell. Whatever the original ingredient was, it survived this process in spirit only. You take another sip. The soup tastes polite, emotionally reserved. Like if it had a personality, it would apologise for taking up space. But somehow this was desirable in the Regency era. Bold flavours were seen as suspicious. Too spicy meant barbaric. Too salty meant improper. Too interesting meant you were trying too hard. So they gave you broth that barely existed. And because everyone else appears to deeply enjoy this muted liquid, you must pretend to too. A footman glides by, carefully watching your progress. If he sees your bowl still full, he may interpret it as a personal insult to his employer, the cook, the cow that produced the bone stock and the entire concept of dining. So you sip, and sip, and sip. Each spoonful brings you closer to the bottom and further from your will to live. Halfway through the bowl, your mind starts wandering. You question your choices, you question the era, you question soup itself as a concept. You begin fantasizing about modern food, ramen, tomato bisque, literally anything with a flavour profile. But you persevere. Eventually you scrape the bowl gently, signalling you have reached the end of your trial. The Duchess gives you a nod of silent approval. The footman removes your bowl with a slight bow, as though you have accomplished something noble. You exhale. You have survived the broth. You have passed the first true test of Regency dining, demonstrating gratitude for something that tastes like the memory of food. And just as you begin to relax, the servants bring out the next course, something with a face. Next comes an entire fish, head, eyes, expression of mild disapproval, resting on an ornate platter. Everyone pretends this is normal. You pretend you're not being watched by a herring. The servant lowers the dish onto the table, with the kind of ceremonial gravity usually reserved for royal births or successful exorcisms. The fish's cloudy little eyes glint in the candlelight as if it knows things about you, private things, mildly embarrassing things you'd prefer a fish not be privy to. Its tiny mouth hangs open, silently judging your fork technique before you've even picked one up. Around you, the aristocrats murmur appreciatively. To them, this is elegance, luxury, a celebration of the sea's bounty, lightly overcooked. To you, it's a corpse on a platter, wearing a lemon slice like a jaunty little hat. A footman approaches with practiced precision and begins carving the fish. And by carving, you soon realise he means gently flaying it open, like he's performing surgery on something he deeply disapproves of. He slices the soft flesh with the flair of someone who was trained for this at age 7 and has been resenting it ever since. You receive your portion, delicately placed on your plate, faint steam rising like the fish's final departing sigh. You stare at it. It stares back. You attempt to break the tension by looking away, but the full fish on the central platter remains firmly within your peripheral vision, still maintaining that unimpressed facial expression. You remind yourself to breathe, through the nose, shallow inhales. You're trying to avoid inhaling too deeply because the scent hovering above your plate is assertive, a blend of brine, butter, and something distinctly maritime. If salt water had a personality, it would be this. The Duchess next to you picks up her fish knife, a slender, curved implement that looks oddly like a weapon a polite person might carry, and effortlessly separates her serving into delicate flakes. You, determined to blend in, do the same, except your knife slips. The fish flicks slightly. For one horrifying moment, you think you've catapulted a piece toward the baronet across the table. Crisis narrowly avoided. You lift your first bite. It's tender, slightly oily, and warmer than expected. The flavour is mild, almost gentle. If soup was an apology, the fish is a soft thank you for your patience during this difficult time. Regency seasoning doesn't overwhelm, it just nudges. But as you chew politely, the fish's face lingers in your mind. It's not grotesque, just unsettling, the way it calmly rests there, as though it arrived at this dinner voluntarily and is now reconsidering its choices. The eye seems to follow you. You deliberately avoid making direct contact, terrified the herring will read your soul and find it disappointing. Another servant appears with additional offerings, sauces, white sauce, brown sauce, a sauce that looks like it's trying its best. Each one smells slightly different. Cream, mushroom, despair. Aristocrats drizzle them with gusto. You follow suit, gently pouring a ladle's worth onto your fish until it resembles something vaguely edible by modern standards. Across the room, someone laughs, a bright tinkling sound. You have no idea what they're laughing at, but you assume it's not the fish. These people have seen hundreds of fish, thousands, fish with faces, fish with expressions, fish that, if provoked, would likely stand up and walk away in protest. You, however, are new to all of this. You take another bite, calmer now. Your shoulders lower. The tension eases. You begin to understand the rhythm of Regency dining. Nothing is meant to comfort you. You simply adapt, quietly, gracefully, while pretending you are not at this very moment having a telepathic standoff with a lemon-garnished sea creature. Finally the plates are lifted. The fish is carried away, its face still unimpressed, and you exhale, victorious. You have survived the piscine judgment, but the dinner is far from over. Because next, things start to wobble. A footman sets down a tureen of turtle soup, which was so fashionable that people literally hunted turtles into panic. You take a spoonful and realise it tastes like melted pond. The aroma wafts upward before you can react, a humid, swampy whisper that makes you briefly question whether you have offended someone important. Regency society loves turtle soup, the way modern society loves overpriced lattes, passionately, illogically, and with no regard for the long-term consequences. Turtles were imported from across oceans, placed in tanks, paraded around kitchens, and simmered for hours to create a broth that tastes like someone boiled ambition with a hint of algae. You peer into your bowl. The liquid is an earthy brown, shimmering faintly in the candlelight as if it contains secrets and regrets. Small flecks of herbs float on the surface, pretending they can disguise the fact that the primary flavour is lake with a personality. Around the table, aristocrats lean forward eagerly. Lady Pembroke sighs contentedly as though she's inhaling the world's finest perfume. Lord Ashcombe proclaims it simply unparalleled, a phrase he's already used 6 times this evening. A baronet 2 seats away remarks that he only eats turtle soup if the turtle was personally known to the family. You quietly hope he's joking. He is not. You lift your spoon again, more cautiously this time. The broth coats your tongue with a silky heaviness that suggests it has opinions about you. It is rich, yes, but also swampy, vegetal, and slightly accusatory, like a stew made by a forest witch who isn't sure she likes you yet. But this is what you do at a Regency dinner. You pretend. You pretend this is delicious. You pretend your throat isn't politely asking, "Are we safe?" You pretend your palate is sophisticated enough to understand the cultural significance of expensive pond water. A servant approaches with condiments, sherry, anchovy essence, cayenne, lemon slices, because Regency chefs believed the best way to improve turtle soup was to confuse it further. You watch in awe as the aristocrats doctor their bowls with elaborate flourishes. A splash here, a sprinkle there, a squeeze of lemon that would make a modern chef weep in fear. You follow suit, adding a dash of sherry that momentarily musks the swamp flavour. Congratulations, you have created Sherry Lake. The footman hovers nearby, checking everyone's bowls as if his soul depends on your enthusiasm. If he notices your hesitation, it could be interpreted as a slight against the entire household. So you straighten your spine, take another sip, and nod approvingly. The nod is perhaps too enthusiastic. The Duchess smiles warmly, clearly relieved you're not a culinary anarchist. Between bites, conversation buzzes. Turtles, it turns out, were the status symbol of the era. London importers sold them for outrageous sums. Some aristocrats even kept them alive in bathtubs until they reached optimal soup maturity, which is a phrase you wish you could unlearn. When a family served turtle soup, it signalled wealth, refinement, and the ability to financially devastate a small Caribbean island. You look around the table. Everyone is glowing with self-satisfaction, as though consuming this murky broth connects them to the very pulse of civilization. You, meanwhile, are quietly having an existential crisis about soup ethics. But then something shifts. The warmth of the broth settles into your chest. The herbs begin to make sense. The sherry softens the edges. You still wouldn't call it delicious, but you understand the appeal is comforting in its own strange earthy way, like drinking, history, or possibly sediment. Finally, your bowl is empty. A small miracle. The footman whisks it away with a bow that suggests you have passed yet another aristocratic trial. The table exhales as one, basking in the communal glow of shared indulgence. You revel in your small victory. You've endured the turtle. You've conquered the swamp. Unfortunately, the next course is arriving, and it has bones. The main courses arrive in waves: roast beef, veal, mutton, poultry, enough meat to open a Costco. Everything glistens suspiciously. You begin to suspect vegetables are illegal. The servants parade forward like an edible cavalry, each one balancing a different carcass carved into socially acceptable shapes. A roasted pheasant lands in front of you, its skin lacquered to a glossy shine that suggests someone spent too long polishing it. A goose follows it, then a saddle of mutton large enough to qualify as a roommate. The table sags slightly under the weight, as though even the furniture is questioning Regency priorities. Around you, aristocrats react not with horror, but with delight, as if they've just been presented with a menu that reads simply, yes. They lean forward, inspecting the meats the way modern people inspect real estate, thoughtfully, hungrily, and with the firm belief that they deserve all of it. A footman, already glistening from his proximity to the roasted herd, offers you slices. A bit of everything, sir/madam, he asks, which is Regency code for I will heap it on your plate unless you physically restrain me. You nod weakly. He interprets your nod as enthusiastic approval. Immediately your plate becomes a geological cross-section of protein, a slice of veal on top of beef, on top of mutton, on top of poultry. You're reasonably sure one of the layers is still making eye contact. You attempt to rearrange the mountain of meat into something less intimidating, but every cut releases more juices. The glisten intensifies. The juices begin to mingle, forming a small puddle that looks like the aftermath of a battle fought entirely by entrees. You glance around the table. No one else seems concerned. These people were raised on carnivorous feasts. They approach meat with the same casual confidence modern people reserve for microwaving leftovers. The Duchess beside you lifts a slab of beef onto her plate with a grace that suggests she was born doing this. She sighs in satisfaction, declaring it done to perfection, which translates to still mooing slightly. You take your first bite. Roast beef. It's tender, smoky, and aggressively present. Before you finish chewing, a servant swoops in and offers you gravy. You accept instinctively. A torrent of thick, glossy sauce floods your plate, drowning several cuts of meat instantly. Your food is now both consumed and sheltered. The next bite, mutton. Dense, rich, and so flavourful it tastes like the animal's life story. You follow it with poultry, dry, determined, slightly alarming, and veal, which is so soft it barely counts as solid food. Each bite is a different chapter of the Regency. How much meat can we serve before someone files a formal complaint? Handbook. As you continue eating, a dawning realization settles over you. Regency aristocrats don't just enjoy meat, they weaponize it. Serving excessive amounts is a status symbol, a way of saying, look at all the animals we sacrificed tonight. Aren't we fabulous? It's luxury by way of livestock. Meanwhile, vegetables appear briefly, quietly, apologetically, like someone smuggled them in under a coat. A plate of boiled carrots materializes near the center of the table. They are limp, pale, emotionally defeated. No one touches them. You suspect that if you attempt to spear one with your fork, the entire room will fall silent, so you stick with the meats. Halfway through your plate, your body begins sending polite signals. Signals such as, please reconsider your choices, and we are not a Regency aristocrat. We were not built for this. But politeness keeps you going. Manners are everything here, and you will not be the first person in history to lose a duel against a roast beef. Still, it's overwhelming. Heat rises from the dishes, mingling with the candle wax and perfumes until the entire dining room smells like a scented candle nobody should ever make. Warm barnyard evening. Finally, a footman returns to remove your plate. You exhale in relief. You have survived the meat gauntlet. But as you lean back, hoping for a moment of digestive peace, another platter arrives. Something round, something grey, something wobbling. Your journey isn't over. It's about to get gelatinous. A servant unveils the night's show dish, a calf's head, staring proudly from a silver platter. Its glassy eyes reflect your soul leaving your body. You freeze. Everyone else reacts with the serene delight of people who have seen this before, many times, in many rooms, in many eras when therapy was absolutely not an option. The calf's head is positioned upright, like it's giving a motivational speech on embracing your destiny. Its tiny nostrils glisten. Its ears have been arranged just so. A lemon slice perches atop its forehead, not unlike a jaunty Regency beret. You don't know whether to eat it or salute it. The aristocrats lean forward, admiring the calf's head with genuine enthusiasm. To them this isn't horrifying, it's tradition, prestige, a culinary masterpiece that announces, our dinner is fancy enough to include something that could stare at you in life and in death. You, meanwhile, grip your fork and pray your expression reads a sophisticated awe and not abject despair. A footman steps forward, holding an elegant carving knife with the same energy a surgeon brings to an operating theatre. He begins slicing the cheek meat with a slow, practiced motion. The room falls silent except for the faint, slick sound of carving, which you try very hard not to think about. Ladies tilt their heads, gentlemen nod approvingly, and you consider time-travelling home immediately. You're offered your portion, a delicate arrangement of cheek meat, a sliver of tongue, and what appears to be a small cube of jellied mystery. Your stomach sends a polite but firm inquiry. Are we sure about this? You ignore it. You're in the Regency era now. Personal preferences don't matter. Appear competent. Appear composed. Appear like someone who regularly consumes faces. You take your first bite of the cheek. It's surprisingly tender, rich, and buttery. Against all odds, it's good. Very good even. The flavours bloom warmly, tasting like well-cooked beef with a hint of history. You nod subtly, as if to say, of course. I knew this would be fine. I was never afraid. I'm emotionally stable. Then comes the tongue. The slice on your plate is small, pink, and entirely too aware of its own symbolism. You pick it up with your fork, carefully bring it to your mouth, and take the smallest bite possible. It's smooth, soft, almost silky. But mentally, you have crossed a boundary you didn't know existed. Your brain tries to negotiate peace between your palate and your conscience, but neither side is winning. Across the table, someone praises the calf's expression. Another compliments the presentation. A third insists this particular calf had excellent bone structure, which raises questions you're not prepared to ask. You take another polite bite. The room watches, the candles flicker. Somewhere in the distance, a violinist plays something mournful. It all feels terribly dramatic for a plate of cow face. A footman now approaches with a truly daring detail. The eye. Yes, The eye, traditionally considered a delicacy, the ultimate test of character, status, and psychological fortitude. The servant pauses beside you, spoon poised. You smile, a brittle, fragile smile that communicates both terror and tax bracket confusion. Perhaps later, you whisper. He nods. You have avoided destiny for now. As the calf's head continues its slow demolition, the atmosphere turns jovial. Aristocrats reminisce about past dinners. Someone recounts a childhood memory involving a similar dish. You wonder what kind of childhood produces fond nostalgia for edible eyeballs. Eventually, the head is carved down to its structural components, and the platter is carried away like a fallen soldier being honoured for bravery. You exhale, tension slipping from your shoulders. You did it. You survived the calf's head. You ate history, culture, and at least one facial feature. But as you reach for your wine to recover, you hear the servants returning, with something jiggling, and this time, it's not staring at you, it's wobbling. Next up is a shimmering dome of aspic containing unidentifiable shapes. Someone calls it elegant. You call it a biology project. The servant holds it aloft like a sacred relic, the candlelight bouncing off its glossy surface and projecting tiny gelatinous rainbows across the table. Inside the translucent dome, you can make out something. Several somethings. A few of the shapes appear to be meat. One might be a carrot. One might be a warning. The entire structure jiggles ominously like it's breathing. The dish is set down in the centre of the table, and every aristocrat leans forward with delight. You lean back slightly, the way a person does when encountering a wild animal that looks both cute and deeply untrustworthy. The aspic wobbles again. You swear it's trying to communicate. Exquisite, the Duchess murmurs. Artful, someone else whispers. Alive? You silently wonder. A footman begins slicing it, which is less slicing and more confidently pushing a knife into resistance that makes no scientific sense. The gelatin quivers with each cut, trembling indignantly, as if offended to be disturbed. Portions are served one by one, each wobbling gently on the plate like a nervous pudding. Yours lands in front of you. It jiggles. You do not. Up close, the contents become slightly more identifiable. Small curls of ham, slivers of chicken, perhaps a confused pea wondering how its life came to this. The entire thing is suspended in a clear, savoury jelly, made by boiling animal bones until nature itself gives up. In the Regency era, this was considered chic. You try to respect that while your modern brain quietly whispers, "This belongs in a lab." You lift your fork. The aspic shivers under your touch like it's trying to retreat. You scoop a bite and it quakes again. Across the table, an aristocrat nods approvingly, mistaking your raw panic for enthusiasm. You take the plunge. Your first bite is cold. Very cold. The jelly melts slowly, releasing flavours that can only be described as meat perfume. The texture is complex, part slippery, part chewy, part moral dilemma. The vegetables trapped inside contribute their own faint, watery despair. You try not to think about what this would sound like if recorded. Regency diners, however, adore it. They hum contentedly. They discuss the aspic's clarity, its firmness, its magnificent structure. You blink at your plate, wondering if you've failed to develop a part of your brain that appreciates architecture in food. You take another bite, because politeness requires it. The jelly wobbles dramatically, as if protesting your decision. The embedded meats shift slightly, reminding you this dish contains layers, literal, emotional, philosophical layers. A gentleman across the table leans forward and says, "There is nothing more refined than a well-set aspic." You smile and nod, pretending to understand. Meanwhile, your taste buds file paperwork requesting hazard pay. You begin to notice the absurdity of the moment. You're in a lavish Regency dining room, wearing clothes that itch, holding a fork you don't fully understand, eating a gelatinous orb full of trapped meats, while polite society pretends this isn't mildly horrifying. And somehow, it's soothing. Because the absurdity is universal. Everyone here is pretending. Everyone is committed. Everyone is wobbling, internally or externally. You continue working through your portion, slowly, determinedly. The jelly softens as the room warms, becoming slightly more pliable, slightly less defiant. Eventually you finish the last bite, and your soul returns to your body. The servant removes your plate like you've passed an exam. The room relaxes. You relax. The aspic continues to jiggle quietly in the background, plotting its revenge. And just when you think the worst is over, another servant arrives with a gravy boat full of something brown and unpredictable. Because nothing pairs with wobbling meat quite like a sauce that may or may not behave itself. A lake of sauces floods the table: anchovy, mushroom, oyster, each more confusing than the last. You ladle something brown onto your plate and hope it doesn't dissolve your cutlery. The footmen line up along the table like soldiers preparing for battle, each one armed with a different sauce vessel. Some hold delicate silver gravy boats. Others carry small tureens shaped like animals, everything from a ceramic fish to a porcelain cow that looks mildly offended about the whole situation. You're not entirely sure whether the sauce inside each one is meant to complement the dish or conquer it. Regency cuisine believes in one guiding philosophy: if the food can't stand on its own, drown it until it stops complaining. The Duchess to your left eagerly reaches for the anchovy sauce, pouring it onto her fish with the confidence of someone who has never once questioned the moral implications of liquefying an entire school of fish. The gentleman across from you spoons mushroom sauce over his calf's head portion until it resembles a forest crime scene. You, feeling pressured by the momentum, pick up the nearest ladle full of a brown, glistening liquid that smells faintly of beef, molasses, and ambition. The moment it hits your plate, your food disappears beneath it like a city swallowed by a tidal wave. You wonder if this is normal. It is. Too normal. You take your first bite. It is intense. The sauce coats your tongue and immediately begins issuing commands. It's salty, slightly sweet, aggressively savoury, and somehow also tastes like it has a social agenda. It lingers long after you swallow, clinging to your taste buds like a Regency-era cling film. Another servant appears, offering oyster sauce, thick, pale, briny, and enthusiastic about its own existence. You decline politely, because you have already reached your chaos limit for the evening. The servant nods, though you sense he silently judges your lack of adventurous spirit. Around the table, sauce usage becomes a form of aristocratic one-upmanship. Lady Pembroke casually mentions that her family uses 3 sauces per plate. Lord Ashcombe insists he once attended a dinner where the cook served 8 varieties. 8. You begin to suspect the Regency era was dangerously close to inventing the condiment arms race. Your plate, meanwhile, continues its metamorphosis. The brown sauce slowly merges with the lingering gravy from the meat course, creating a new, darker substance that bubbles ominously. You poke it with your fork. It does not respond. Good. You feared it might. You take another bite, letting the sauce's complexity wash over you. It's oddly comforting, warm, rich, bold, almost soothing in its determination to dominate every flavour on your plate. For a moment you understand why Regency diners loved this. Sauces disguise dryness. They hide overcooking. They allow you to politely pretend the chef is spectacular, even when the meat is chewing you back. The servants rotate again, offering fresh ladles of steaming concoctions. You watch in awe as aristocrats continue layering sauce upon sauce. A single slice of mutton disappears under mushroom, then anchovy, then an Alarming drizzle of something citrine and suspiciously runny. No one bats an eye. This is normal, this is refined. You, meanwhile, are working your way through your sauced-over mystery bite, letting its warmth settle your nerves. The liquid softens every texture until the entire plate feels like it's gently melting into one cohesive dish, less a meal and more a warm edible blanket. Eventually the sauces begin to thin as the footmen carry them off to the kitchen. Your plate looks like a battlefield. Your taste buds are experiencing déjà vu, and you are somehow both exhausted and comforted by the sheer intensity of Regency flavour logic. You set down your fork, relieved you've survived another course. But as your shoulders relax, a servant approaches with a new dish, a roasted peacock, with feathers, and you suddenly understand why they needed so many sauces in the first place. A roasted peacock arrives, feathers reattached for dramatic flair. Everyone claps politely while pretending the meat isn't incredibly dry. The servant sets the magnificent creature at the centre of the table, like a decorative offering to the gods of questionable cuisine. The peacock's iridescent plumage fans out behind it, reassembled after roasting, because nothing says high society like painstakingly gluing feathers back onto a carcass. Its neck, stiffened into an elegant arc, gives the unsettling impression that the bird died while trying to remember something important. The aristocrats sigh with admiration. This is theatre. This is spectacle. This is what happens when an era has too much time, too many feathers, and absolutely no refrigeration. You sit there in awe, feeling as though you've accidentally wandered into a culinary fashion show rather than a dinner course. A footman steps forward with a long carving knife, shining dangerously in the candlelight. He begins slicing through the peacock's lacquered skin, which cracks audibly like someone snapping a very expensive twig. The interior meat reveals itself as pale, firm, and so dry it threatens to absorb the moisture from the surrounding air. "Marvellous," whispers Lady Pembroke. "You can really taste the tradition," someone else adds. Translation: no one can taste anything because their tongues are fused to the roof of their mouths. Your plate receives a courteous slab of peacock breast, arranged with care beside a garnish of wilted herbs that gave up hours ago. You tap the meat gently with your fork. It responds with a hollow thud. This is less of a meal and more of a historical reenactment. You take your first bite. The texture is educational. It flakes apart like old paperwork. The flavour is mild, astonishingly mild. If you concentrated very hard, you could almost taste the concept of poultry. You reach instinctively for your water, but you remember too late that Regency water isn't always safe. You sip wine instead. The wine doesn't help the dryness doesn't help the wine. Together they declare war on your esophagus. Still, everyone else seems delighted. They're commenting on the plumage, the artistry, the magnificence of the presentation. No one is talking about the flavour. This tells you everything you need to know about Regency dining priorities. Another platter arrives, this time a swan. Its neck, posed in a graceful S-curve, gives it an air of elegant disapproval. The servants glide seamlessly into place, replacing plates, offering sauces that might reintroduce moisture to your life, and describing each bird like it's an eligible bachelor in a gossip column. You watch as a duke spears a slice of peacock, chews thoughtfully, and nods approvingly. You cannot tell whether he actually enjoys it, or is simply bound by centuries of aristocratic tradition to pretend he does. You take another bite out of sheer peer pressure. The meat remains as dry as Regency humour. Then the conversation shifts to exotic birds as status symbols. Someone mentions having once tasted bustard. Another brags about having tried flamingo. A viscount boasts with suspicious pride that his grandmother served lark pie at her wedding. Tiny birds baked whole, bones and all. You smile politely, trying not to imagine a pie filled with existential dread. A servant discreetly places more peacock on your plate. You panic. You're still dealing with the first slice. But in Regency society, refusing additional food is only slightly less offensive than starting a fistfight at the table. You accept it, your face frozen in a mask of polite terror. As you attempt to swallow another bite, you begin mentally drafting your will. Your tongue feels like it has been sandblasted. You wonder if this is how deserts are formed. At last, mercifully, the platters are carried away. The peacock's feathers rustle as it disappears through the servant's door, a final theatrical flourish. The aristocrats sit back, pleased with themselves, satisfied by cultural performance, rather than hydration. You exhale softly. You survive the birds. But before you can fully recover, the footmen return once more, carrying something seasoned so aggressively it can only mean one thing. The Regency spice wars are about to begin. Every dish is either aggressively seasoned or tastes like warm air. There is no middle ground. Your tongue begins to file a complaint. It becomes clear almost immediately that Regency cooks viewed seasoning not as a culinary tool, but as a declaration of war. One dish arrives so heavily spiced that it glows a faint, angry red, radiating heat like it holds a personal grudge. The next arrives with such little flavour that you're convinced it is the physical manifestation of silence. Your taste buds are confused. Your brain is confused. Even your fork seems unsure of what to do next. The gentleman across the table happily digs into a dish dusted with enough mace and nutmeg to embalm a small horse. "Splendid," he declares, while you discreetly wipe away the tear that escapes your eye after your first bite. It's not emotional, it's survival. Your tongue has entered negotiations with your sinuses. Then, as if to restore cosmic balance, the next course is flavourless, profoundly flavourless, impressively flavourless. It tastes like someone boiled a memoir. The vegetables are soft, pale, and radiate the energy of a sigh. You take a bite and immediately forget what you're eating. Your mouth experiences nothing. Your brain reports nothing. The dish has spiritually neutralized you. This is the Regency paradox. Spice was either feared or abused. On one hand, you have spices treated like volatile weapons. Regency merchants imported cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, and pepper in quantities that alarmed botanists and common sense. Cooks wielded them enthusiastically, seasoning dishes with the subtlety of a toddler emptying glitter onto a craft project. A single bite of spiced beef sends your pulse racing. A spoonful of the curried hare feels less like dinner and more like an initiation ritual. On the other hand, some dishes are seasoned so lightly they could be entered into witness protection. Boiled potatoes appear, pale and trembling, unburdened by salt. Cabbage sits in a bowl, staring at you with the dead-eyed expression of someone who gave up hope long before dinner started. The cook clearly feared seasoning would accidentally make the vegetables interesting. Your tongue, meanwhile, is struggling to maintain a sense of identity. One moment it's being assaulted by pepper, the next it's drifting through a void, tasting only the faint memory of steam. You sip your wine for comfort. The wine offers emotional support but no answers. Conversation around the table continues as if nothing is amiss. Guests praise the boldness of the spice-heavy dishes and the purity of the bland ones. You nod along, trying not to reveal that your mouth is currently experiencing both a volcanic eruption and a spiritual retreat. A footman places a dish of spiced gravy near you. The surface trembles slightly as though warning you. You hesitantly spoon a bit onto your plate. The scent alone clears out your sinuses, your regrets, and possibly a few minor curses attached to your family line. Then comes a plain white roll, soft, warm, completely devoid of personality. It tastes like it was created solely to remind you what neutral food feels like. You cling to it like a life raft between waves of aggressive seasoning. Yet, strangely, after several courses you begin to appreciate this chaotic dance. The extremes balance each other. One dish punches you in the mouth, the next tucks you gently into bed. One awakens your ancestors, the next soothes your digestive system like a lullaby. It is, in its own way, harmonious. Eventually the spice dishes are cleared, and you inhale with relief, feeling your tongue slowly return to its usual duties. You drink a little more wine, feeling triumphant, but just as you begin to relax, a servant appears carrying something round, soft and orange. Boiled carrots. You brace yourself, because if there's one thing Regency cooks feared more than subtlety, it was letting vegetables taste like anything at all. A footman brings boiled carrots that disintegrate when you look at them. You realise vegetables were cooked until they confess their secrets. He places the dish in front of you with the solemnity of someone presenting evidence in a criminal trial. The carrots wobble weakly, their colour fading into a muted orange best described as emotional burnout. You poke one lightly with your fork. It shatters instantly, as though it has seen too much. Around the table no one seems alarmed. Regency aristocrats treat vegetables not as food but as obligations. Things one must include on the table to maintain the appearance of health, while quietly rejecting the idea of nutrition. They glance at the platter the way modern people glance at a treadmill, pleasant in theory, dreadful in practice. A duchess politely takes 2 carrot fragments, arranging them at the far corner of her plate where they can't ruin her meat's social standing. A baronet scoops a spoonful of boiled turnips and places them beside his peacock like a hostage exchange. Someone makes a comment about the lovely softness, which is a delicate way of saying these vegetables have given up. You take a bite. The carrot evaporates on your tongue. There is no chewing involved. It tastes like warm, damp air. Another bite confirms your suspicion. This vegetable died long before it ever touched boiling water. This seems to be the Regency approach. Cook vegetables until their original personality is gone. Texture, eliminated. Flavour, surrendered. Nutrients, not on their watch. It's as if the cooks were afraid of crunch or joy. You glance at a bowl of peas. They aren't individual vegetables anymore. They've merged into something resembling pea oatmeal, a mushy green mass with the vibe of a melted snowman. The next dish is cabbage, pale and drooping, its very existence a cry for help. Despite this, everyone pretends the vegetable course is important. They murmur polite nothings like quite tender and perfectly done, which in Regency dialect translates to, I will not be eating this. Guests place vegetables on their plates, move them around strategically, and then avoid them entirely while maintaining eye contact with their peers to ensure no one notices their deception. You try one more carrot fragment out of sympathy. It dissolves immediately, leaving behind a faint sweetness and the emotional echo of what once might have been a vegetable. Your fork sinks into the turnips effortlessly, too effortlessly. They have the consistency of baby food, but without the optimism. But occasionally something unexpected happens. A single rogue carrot, slightly firmer than the rest, survives the boiling onslaught. You spot one now, a tiny orange rebel. You spear it with cautious hope. It holds its shape. You taste it. For a fleeting second, you detect a flavour, a whisper of earth, a hint of substance, and then it too collapses. The room continues its polite ritual. A woman in a lace gown places a pea on her tongue and nods approvingly, as though she has just tasted enlightenment. A viscount claims his mother always insisted vegetables improve digestion. His expression suggests his digestion violently disagrees. Still, despite the blandness, the mush, and the complete lack of joy, these vegetables serve a purpose. They make the meats look even more impressive. They give the sauces something to flood. They allow diners to claim balance and restraint, even while consuming half the animal kingdom. You move the remaining vegetables around your plate, gently sculpting them into a pattern that conveys, yes, I have absolutely engaged with these, while eating precisely none. At last, the servants return to clear the table. A carrot fragment escapes, sliding across the plate like it's trying to flee. You understand completely. The bowls disappear behind the kitchen door. The aristocrats relax, relieved the vegetable ordeal is over. And just as you begin to recover, a new platter arrives. Heavy, wooden, ominous. Bread. Dense, historical, structurally questionable bread. You brace yourself. The bread arrives with the density of a small asteroid. You attempt to break it and nearly sprain something. A footman places the loaf in front of you with both hands, as if he's lowering a sacred relic or something hazardous that could breach the hull of a ship if dropped. The crust is dark, thick, and texturally reminiscent of medieval fortifications. You press a finger against it and discover it has no give whatsoever. This bread fears nothing. This bread has seen wars. The aristocrats around you regard it with casual indifference. They've spent their entire lives training for this moment, building wrist strength and emotional resilience. You, meanwhile, are sizing up the loaf like a boxer studying an opponent, calculating angles, gauging weak points, wondering if it even has weak points. You reach again, trying to tear off a piece. The bread resists, actively. This feels less like breaking bread and more like attempting to open a stubborn jar. You brace your elbow, grip harder, twist slightly, and finally, the crust gives way with a small, alarming crack. A crumb ricochets off your sleeve. You pretend this is normal. Inside, the crumb structure is dense, slightly damp and surprisingly heavy. If you drop this on a wooden floor, you're pretty sure it would leave a mark. The interior smells faintly of yeast, smoke, and determination. You take a bite. The bread pushes back. It's chewy in a way that suggests you're now engaged in a prolonged physical negotiation. Across the table, a duke delicately dips his bread into a puddle of sauce, softening it into something more edible. A clever tactic. You follow suit, letting the gravy soak into your crust until it stops behaving like geological material. It helps. Slightly. The truth is, Regency bread wasn't designed for pleasure. It was designed for durability, longevity, architectural stability. It needed to survive long journeys, temperature fluctuations, inattentive storage, and possibly blunt force usage. The average loaf could double as a home security system. You experiment with different methods. A small piece dipped in mushroom sauce, improved. A larger chunk paired with butter, marginally improved. A corner dipped in turtle soup, unwise, emotionally and spiritually. A few aristocrats tear off pieces using only their fingertips, which makes you wonder if they train for this the same way Regency fencing masters trained with swords. Perhaps there were coaches, drills, gentle squeeze, Lady Weston, not a full assault. Excellent wrist rotation, Lord Drayton. You've softened the crust admirably. Meanwhile, servants continue circulating with baskets of even more bread. Some loaves are rye, others barley, a few suspiciously hard biscuit-like creations that look less like food and more like equipment for building small bridges. You suspect at least one could be used to grind spices. You observe the bread etiquette. Don't cut it with your knife. Vulgar. Don't crumble it excessively. Messy. Don't hurl it in self-defense. Tempting but frowned upon. Instead, you take small, patient bites, letting the flavors unfold, slowly, eventually, begrudgingly. And then an unexpected phenomenon occurs. Once your jaw muscles adjust and the bread has soaked up enough sauce, a pleasant, warm heaviness settles in your chest. The bread becomes comforting, solid, reliable, like a friend who communicates entirely through weighted blankets. It grounds you in the chaos of the dinner, after the jellied horrors, the mysterious sauces, the dehydrated peacock, the emotional roller coaster of spices, the vegetables that dissolved upon sight. This bread stays with you, quite literally, probably for days. A moment of calm washes over the table as guests nibble quietly. The candles flicker softly. Someone sighs. Even the bread seems to relax slightly, its crust softening at the edges as if finally accepting you. Then the footmen return, not with bread, not with sauce, but with goblets of wine so full they're practically overflowing. Because nothing pairs with a loaf that could break your toe quite like enough wine to briefly forget what century you're in. There is wine, so much wine. Wine with fish, wine with meat, wine with dessert. Wine because you cannot emotionally handle more jellied meats. A footman appears beside you with the stealth of a well-trained cat, holding a bottle of claret. Before you can protest, your goblet is filled to the brim. A second servant arrives moments later with Madeira. A third surfaces with port, as if summoned by your rising anxiety. You begin to suspect the staff are working in shifts to ensure your bloodstream becomes at least 40% alcohol by the end of the evening. Around the table, aristocrats lift their glasses with an ease that comes from lifelong practice. You imitate them, swirling your wine thoughtfully despite having no idea what you're doing. The room encourages it. This is a culture built on sipping, swirling, sniffing, and then pretending you detected notes of oak, citrus, or the subtle whisper of a vineyard that hasn't existed for a century. Your first sip is warm and comforting. You exhale. Ah, a soft blanket for your frazzled palate. The wine smooths away the lingering anxiety caused by the calf's head and the wobbling aspic. It doesn't erase the memory of the peacock, but it gently muffles it. Then another wine arrives. White wine, light and floral, paired, they say, with fish. You sip and wonder who decided fish needed its own designated beverage. Before you finish contemplating this, a sparkling wine appears, then a fortified wine, then something sweet and golden that tastes like dessert planning a rebellion. Your glass is never empty. In fact, the servants seem morally offended by the concept of an empty glass. If you take a sip, a hand appears at your elbow, refilling immediately. It's less like drinking wine and more like being quietly waterboarded with elegance. But the effect is undeniable. The more wine you consume, the more forgiving your taste buds become. The dry peacock, suddenly acceptable. The overseasoned mutton, surprisingly tolerable. The aspic, still horrifying, but now more in an abstract philosophical way than an immediate threat to your sanity. A soft flush spreads across your cheeks. The room glows a little warmer. The chandeliers sparkle more brightly. Even the Duke's relentless commentary about vineyard quality begins to sound soothing. You nod along to his ramblings about tannins, pretending you understand while internally wondering if tannin is a flavour, a feeling, or something. Scientists invented as a prank. Conversation grows lively. Someone on your left recounts a scandal involving a marquis and a mislabelled wine bottle. Across the table, two ladies debate whether claret or burgundy pairs better with roasted swan. A gentleman insists that the best wine is the one that makes you forget the previous course. You silently agree. Your next sip is deeper, richer. Your shoulders drop. The tightness in your chest dissolves. Wine solves many Regency-era problems. Dry bread, bland vegetables, mysteriously gelatinous meats, and the existential dread of being judged by the silverware. At one point, you tilt your head back and ponder whether you've ever had this much wine in your life. The answer is no, not even close. This is an Olympic-level tasting event disguised as dinner. You're barely halfway through the meal, yet you feel like you've been slowly marinated. As dessert approaches, the servants retreat briefly, only to return with yet another category of wine, sweet wines, dessert wines, wines that taste like fruit contemplating a career change. You accept another glass because by now resistance is futile and also, frankly, undesirable. The aristocrats raise their glasses in a final toast to the evening, to the company, to the excessive birds, to the questionable sauces, and to the shared act of surviving the first half of this dinner. You clink your glass gently, the sound soft and musical. And for one blissful moment, everything tastes wonderful. But then the footmen reappear with a tray of delicate desserts, towers of cream, candied fruit, wobbling confections, and you remember, you still have to navigate Regency table manners while mildly drunk. Good luck. Every movement you make could ruin your reputation forever. Do you dab the corners of your mouth? Cut your bread wrong? Pick up the wrong spoon? Congratulations, you're a scandal now. Regency table etiquette is less a set of polite guidelines and more a full-contact mental sport. One wrong gesture, one misplaced napkin, one accidental fork clank, and suddenly you're the subject of whispered gossip that will outlive several of your descendants. You take a slow breath, reminding yourself that your only goal now is to survive this dinner without triggering an international incident. You start with the napkin. Simple, right? Wrong. Do you unfold it completely or partially? Place it on your lap or drape it elegantly? After a moment of tense observation, you follow the Duchess's lead. A gentle unfold, a graceful placement, as though laying a small bird to rest. Perfect. You haven't failed yet. Next comes the matter of posture. Regency posture isn't just upright, it's upright. You must sit as though an invisible puppeteer has pulled a string straight through the crown of your head. Slumping, unthinkable. Leaning on your elbows, grounds for exile. You straighten until your spine begins questioning its life choices. Then, the utensils. Oh, the utensils. Though you have endured many courses by now, your confidence remains paper thin. The table is still a silver obstacle course. You move slowly, carefully, picking up your fork with the reverence of someone handling an ancient artifact. You notice a lady across from you doing something with her wrist, an elegant tilt. You mimic it, hoping it's not a gesture that signals marriage intentions. You attempt to cut something on your plate, something soft and innocent. But Regency etiquette decrees that you must cut silently, completely silently. The ideal guest produces no scraping, no tapping, no hint that metal is contacting porcelain. You try, you fail. Your knife makes a faint noise. 3 heads swivel in your direction. You smile faintly, pretending you heard nothing. Conversation adds a new layer of terror. You must speak, of course. Silence makes you look brooding or ill, but you must speak lightly. Nothing political, nothing gloomy, nothing too personal. A safe topic is weather, but even then don't imply it inconvenienced you. Weather is an aristocrat's cousin, respected, never insulted. You mention the pleasant glow of the candles instead. Several guests nod. You're temporarily safe. You go to drink your wine, but beware. Regency diners do not gulp. They do not slurp. They do not chug in despair. They sip daintily, genteelly, as though tasting sunlight filtered through lace curtains. You lift your glass with the tips of your fingers, take the smallest sip imaginable, and set it down quietly enough not to disturb a mouse. Then comes the coughing hazard. Something goes down wrong? You choke slightly? You clear your throat? Absolutely not. The correct protocol is, do not cough. Nothing is more scandalous than acknowledging your respiratory system exists. If you must cough, you disguise it within a polite smile and pray no one notices your eyes watering, and heaven forbid you sneeze. A sneeze during dinner could end dynasties. You continue, navigating the table, passing dishes with your left hand, never reaching across, never gesturing too broadly, never appearing too hungry, never appearing too not hungry. One misstep, one overly enthusiastic reach for the bread, and you're suddenly that person from the unfortunate dinner of 7. Meanwhile, aristocrats around you glide through the etiquette like experienced dancers, lifting forks and sipping wine in a perfect choreographed rhythm. You mimic them as best you can, terrified but determined, and gradually you start to settle into the pattern. Your shoulders loosen, your breathing steadies, you move with cautious grace. You are learning the dance. Then, as you take a final silent forkful, the servant appears again, practically materializing from the ether, with a tray of delicate desserts, tiny towers of cream, glazed fruits, pastries that glimmer ominously. Your relief dissolves instantly, because now you must eat dessert with dignity, and that is a challenge no etiquette manual can truly prepare you for. Dozens of silent servants hover behind you, watching your every chew like judges at an eating competition. Don't choke. They'll see. Their presence is immediate, felt before seen. Footmen stand arranged around the perimeter of the dining room like a living wallpaper pattern. Tall, immaculately dressed, perfectly still except for the subtle rise and fall of their breath. Each one positioned with geometric precision, as if the household employed a mathematician to arrange its staff. You become acutely aware of your movements. Every gesture, every lift of the fork, every swallow suddenly becomes an event with spectators. These men have mastered the art of expressionless observation. Their job is not just to serve, it's to witness, quietly, relentlessly. One stands just behind your shoulder, close enough that you can feel the soft displacement of air as he shifts weight from one foot to the other. He does not speak, he does not blink. You suspect he knows how many bites you've taken compared to everyone else. You try to focus on your dessert, but the sensation of being monitored transforms each mouthful into a small personal crisis. Did you chew too loudly? Did you breathe weirdly? Did your spoon clink? You're not sure, but the footman's eyebrow twitches microscopically, and your soul leaves your body. The footmen are trained to anticipate needs before diners even experience them. A glass dips below 1/3 full. A hand appears. A sauce bowl nears empty, immediately replenished. You glance at your wine for 1 second too long, just a moment of reflection, and a footman swoops in to top it up, locking you into yet another round of polite drinking. You attempt to thank him with a small nod. Error. Footmen do not want acknowledgement. They want invisibility. He withdraws without reaction, but you're certain you've broken some unspoken law of the household code. Across the table, an earl drops his fork. Footman retrieves it before it hits the ground. In a single motion, smooth, quiet, supernaturally fast, another replaces it with a clean one. You're convinced these men are trained in some ancient martial art involving silverware. They glide between chairs like ghosts with immaculate posture. Not once do they bump a guest. Not once do they brush against a table leg. Meanwhile, you cannot shift your weight without your chair producing a noise that echoes across the entire county. You look to your left. A lady delicately wipes her mouth, and before the napkin even drifts back onto her lap, a footman ghosts forward to adjust something perfectly. Its placement, its fold, its angle relative to continental trade winds. You're not sure, you just know it's correct now. And then there's the judgment, the silent, gentle, devastating judgment. Footmen see everything. They see when you nearly stab yourself with a fork. They see when you misjudge the strength of Regency bread and almost launch a crumb into orbit. They see when you hesitate before taking a bite of aspic, questioning every life choice that led you to this dinner. They are the guardians of standards, the quiet chroniclers of your downfall. You take another bite of dessert, a trembling cream tower. It quivers, your hand quivers. Somewhere behind you a footman inhales sharply. You steady yourself. You will not be the guest who topples the dessert. Footmen step forward again, clearing plates with synchronized precision. It's mesmerizing, like watching a flock of well-dressed birds migrate across the table. Within seconds the dishes vanish, leaving behind polished surfaces and a faint scent of lemon oil. As they retreat to their line along the wall, they resume their silent vigil, watching, waiting, ready. You exhale slowly. You survived the scrutiny. For now. But dinner isn't over, and soon, as the candles flicker low and the air grows heavier, you begin to notice the smell, not perfume, not food, something atmospheric. Because Regency dining rooms come with their own ecosystem, and the footman will quietly witness your reaction to that too. The dining room is warm, too warm, and between the perfumes, mutton and stewed onions, the air becomes thick enough to slice. You sit very still, breathing carefully, because the air has texture now. It's no longer just something you inhale, it's something you negotiate with. Each breath feels like drawing soup into your lungs, a fragrant hot cloud that clings to your insides like wallpaper paste. You tilt your head slightly, wondering if you can find a pocket of breathable atmosphere, but the entire room seems unified in its quest to overwhelm your senses. Regency dinners were many things, lavish, chaotic, emotionally taxing, but subtle they were not. Scent was part of the performance. The aristocrats wear heavy perfumes distilled from flowers, herbs, and possibly vengeance. Every lady smells like a botanical garden planning a hostile takeover. Every gentleman smells like bergamot, musk, and ambition. Then comes the competing scent of the food. Roasted meats exude their own powerful aura, warm, dense, lingering. The mutton alone produces a perfume strong enough to haunt future generations. Stewed onions add their own humid melody, rising from every dish like steam escaping a cauldron of regret. Even the aspic contributes a faintly savoury whisper, a gelatinous sigh of, "I still exist." The candles don't help. Dozens of them flicker along the table, melting into warm puddles of beeswax. As they burn, they release a sweetly smoky smell that wraps itself around the other scents, creating a layered bouquet that can only be described as historically accurate discomfort. The heat from their flames mixes with the heat from your increasingly flushed face until you feel like you're slow roasting from the inside out. You glance discreetly at the aristocrats. They appear entirely unfazed. They've trained for this. They grew up in houses where ventilation was theoretical, and dining rooms doubled as pressure cookers. Lady Pembroke fans herself languidly, not to cool down, but to waft her perfume into better prominence. A gentleman next to her dabs his brow with a lace handkerchief that smells like lilies, powerful enough to stun a horse. Meanwhile, you take another measured inhale and instantly regret it. The combined forces of onion steam, animal fat and rosewater invade your nostrils like a tiny, well-organized army. You cough quietly, politely into your napkin, because Regency etiquette forbids bodily functions, but also forbids dying at the table, and you must balance these priorities. The warm air settles on your skin, creating a thin sheen of historical perspiration. You find yourself longing for a window, an open door, a crack in reality, anything that might allow modern ventilation to sneak through. But the heavy velvet drapes remain obstinately closed. Fresh air apparently is for peasants. At some point you begin to identify the scents individually. This is either adaptation or surrender. You can now tell which perfume contains jasmine, which dish is responsible for the onion fog, and which wax candle is melting too aggressively. It becomes a strange sensory meditation. You drift through the dinner, cataloguing aromas like a Regency sommelier of suffering. There's also the smell of people. Not unpleasant, just human. Warm wool coats, leather gloves, silk garments absorbing the rising humidity. Every breath adds to the atmosphere. Every shift of clothing releases a small puff of era-specific scent. You're inhaling the Regency experience quite literally, and yet there is something oddly comforting about it. The scents blend into a tapestry of history, a reminder that these people lived without climate control, without deodorant as you know it, without the faint mercy of air conditioning. They survived on candle heat, rose fumes and optimism. The dining room becomes a living organism, breathing alongside you, smelling like life in all its messy, fragrant truth. As the final savoury dishes are whisked away, the smell shifts. Lighter, sweeter aromas drift in from the dessert trays, sugar, cream, baked pastry, candied peel. A soft mercy, a scented apology. You relax slightly. The worst is behind you, until a servant lights more candles. Suddenly the room brightens, the temperature jumps 3 degrees, and the air thickens again with renewed enthusiasm. Regency dining is not for the weak, and tonight, neither are your sinuses. The dessert table is a towering mountain of moulded creams, custards, candied fruit, and brightly coloured gelatinous shapes that wobble like they know your secrets. A servant wheels the table toward the centre of the room, and for a moment the candlelight catches on the polished silver trays, turning the entire display into a sugary mirage. Your brain, exhausted from the previous courses, hesitates. Are these actually edible foods or decorative sculptures commissioned out of boredom? The Regency elite adored extravagant desserts, not because they were delicious, opinions varied, but because sugar itself was a symbol of wealth. This table is less end-of-meal treat and more economic flex with frosting. The centerpiece is a multi-tiered moulded cream confection shaped like a swan wearing a crown. Its beak glistens ominously. Its wings, actually carefully swirled cream, look ready to fold into battle formation. Next to it sits a massive trifle layered in such perfect stripes it resembles a geological cross-section of dessert. Custard, sponge, sherry-soaked cake, jam, more custard. It's basically a structural engineer's project disguised as food. Then there are the gelatin desserts, vibrantly coloured and trembling gently with every footstep in the room. Lime green, jewel red, a shade of blue that does not exist in nature. They're beautiful in a way that makes you suspicious, as the table rolls to a stop. One particularly glossy dome jiggles suggestively at you, as if acknowledging your earlier struggles with aspic. You narrow your eyes at it. It narrows its wobble back. The aristocrats approach the dessert table with the reverence of pilgrims. They point, nod, and murmur appreciatively. "Marvellous consistency," Lady Pembroke says, examining a moulded custard shaped like a cherub who looks mildly disgruntled. A gentleman gestures toward a candied pineapple and explains that pineapples were once so expensive people rented them to display at parties. You look at the pineapple, wondering if it too has seen horrors. Your plate is gently filled by a servant. No choices offered, just a curated selection of sugary triumphs and mistakes. A pale yellow custard slides onto one side. A slice of layered trifle is deposited with a soft plop. A spoonful of candied fruit, glistening like jewelled snails, lands beside it. And finally, a wobbling blue gelatin tower that seems personally offended by gravity is placed front and centre. You take your first bite. Custard. Sweet, creamy, silky, soothing after the savoury battlefield you survived earlier. The custard tastes like something made by a person who had a rare good day in the Regency kitchen, a small miracle of dairy and dreams. You relax slightly. Next, the trifle. You dive in. The sponge is soft, the jam sweet, the sherry lingering. It's like eating a memory of cake, a pleasant one. This is the first moment in the meal where your palate feels truly embraced. Then, feeling brave, you attempt a bite of candied fruit. The texture is firm, sticky, and alarmingly sweet. It tastes like fruit that sold its soul for immortality. But it's not bad, just intense, like a flavour trying to convince you it's important. Finally, the gelatin. You lift your spoon and it quivers. You scoop a piece and it shivers. You bring it to your mouth and it vibrates like it has stage fright. The texture is cool and bouncy. The flavour? Sweet. Only sweet. It tastes like sugar was handed a spotlight and told to give the performance of its life. It's not unpleasant, just aggressively enthusiastic. Around you, aristocrats chat animatedly. Dessert always revives them. Even the footmen relax slightly, relieved to be serving something that cannot leak, wobble ominously, or judge you from a platter. You take another bite of trifle, letting the sweetness settle you. After the meats, the spices, the sauces, the aspic, the emotional trauma of the calf's head, dessert feels like stepping into a warm bath. As you savour the last spoonfuls, the candles flicker low, and the dessert table glows softly, glittering like the sugary peak of a mountain you have successfully climbed. And just when you think the evening might finally be winding down, someone mentions the ice. The ice. Oh no, they're bringing out the most expensive, most impractical dessert of all. Prepare yourself. Things are about to get cold. Someone brings out ice cream, an absolute luxury in an era without freezers. You take a bite and immediately understand why people wrote poems about it. The icy dessert sits before you, like a miracle carved straight out of winter itself. In a dining room so warm it could incubate tropical birds, this frosty confection feels illegal. You stare at it with awe, marvelling at the sheer audacity of serving something cold in a time when refrigeration meant bury it and pray. The aristocrats glow with pride. Producing ice cream in the Regency era required an entire supply chain of chaos. Ice harvested from lakes, packed into straw, stored underground, transported by shivering labourers who probably reconsidered their life choices with every mile. By the time the dessert arrives at the table, it has already survived a heroic journey deserving of its own epic ballad. Your spoon trembles as you lift the first bite. The ice cream is pale, firm, and already starting to soften in the heat of the dining room and the heat of your hand, which now feels embarrassingly modern. You place the cold spoonful on your tongue, and for the first time all evening, flavour doesn't attack you, overwhelm you, or leave you questioning your life decisions. Instead, it soothes, it cools, it whispers, "You've suffered enough." It tastes like sweet cream and relief, a soft, gentle sweetness that glides rather than punches. No suspicious spices, no jellied meats, no hidden bones, just pure comfort in frozen form. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. The Duchess beside you notices your expression and smiles knowingly, as though she too once tasted ice cream for the first time and briefly ascended to another plane of existence. "Marvellous, isn't it?" she murmurs, dabbing delicately at the corner of her mouth. "A true indulgence." Around the table, the dessert is treated like a spiritual event. A gentleman closes his eyes after each spoonful, muttering something about the divine marriage of cold and cream. Another praises the kitchen for maintaining ice in this season, though it's unclear if he believes the cook personally wrestled it from an Arctic glacier. Ladies flutter fans, not to cool themselves, but to keep the ice cream from melting too quickly. Guests lean in to discuss the fashionable new flavours emerging among Europe's elite. Lemon, raspberry, vanilla, if you were truly decadent, because vanilla beans were once more expensive than common sense. More servants arrive with additional frosty creations, granitas, ices moulded into shapes of fruit, and sorbets so vibrantly coloured they seem to defy the existence of natural pigments. A bright red cherry ice glistens like a gemstone. A pale lemon ice emits a faint citrus aroma, immediately refreshing the entire table. You take another bite and feel your overheated, overspiced, overproteined body sigh in gratitude. This is more than dessert. This is mercy. But there's an art to eating icy treats in this time period. Speed. The candles radiate heat. The room is warm with people and emotion and lingering onion vapour. If you don't eat quickly, your elegant dessert will transform into a lukewarm puddle of sugary resignation. You accelerate. So does everyone else. The aristocrats maintain perfect posture while subtly shoveling ice cream into their mouths, with the urgency of people who know this luxury has a shelf life of exactly 7 minutes. Footmen hover, prepared to whisk away melting dishes before the table witnesses the horror of dessert failure. You savour your final bite, cold, delicate, improbably perfect, and place your spoon down gently. Around you, the table hums with renewed energy. Spirits rise, palates reset. Even the air feels momentarily lighter, as though the entire room exhaled in unison. But as the servants clear away the icy remains, you feel another shift. Conversation deepens, postures relax. Someone suggests moving to the drawing room, because now comes the real test of the evening, surviving Regency socializing while extremely full, slightly tipsy, and sitting on several pounds of boiled carrots. Guests pass around olives, figs, and preserved lemons like rare artifacts. Everything tastes like someone tried very hard, and maybe they shouldn't have. A footman appears holding a silver tray of olives, dark, glossy, suspiciously plump. He presents them with the same reverence one might use for handling royal jewels. You take one politely because everyone else is taking one, and the pressure to participate in this edible performance art is overwhelming. The olive tastes intense, salty enough to reset your cellular structure. You try not to flinch, but your left eye twitches uncooperatively. Next comes a small dish of figs. They glisten under the candlelight, each one plump and slightly sticky, like they're sweating under the pressure of being imported. Regency aristocrats love figs, not because they taste particularly good after travelling across continents in questionable conditions, but because they're expensive. Eating one is less about flavour and more about announcing to the table, I have influence, and a budget for fruit that travelled farther than most of my relatives. You lift a fig to your mouth and take a small, cautious bite. It is both mushy and crunchy, sweet and musty, like a jam that went to university and came back with strange radical ideas. The aristocrats hum appreciatively, praising the continental elegance. You nod in agreement while discreetly placing the remainder of your fig on the outskirts of your plate, where it can't emotionally affect you. Then the preserved lemons arrive. They are bright, they're glossy, they're aggressively yellow, like sunshine with unresolved anger issues. A lady beside you gushes about how her cousin in London pays a small fortune for these. A gentleman boasts about a lemon tree he keeps in a heated greenhouse, which probably receives more affection than most Regency children. You place a tiny sliver of preserved lemon on your tongue. It hits your taste buds like a citrus ambush, sharp, salty, sour, and sweet, all at once. It tastes like the lemon has seen things, learned things, returned from its journey forever changed. You nod thoughtfully, pretending this is a sophisticated flavour when in fact your mouth is quietly screaming. More trays circulate, dates, candied orange peels, sugared nuts, dried pears. Each one represents a different part of the world, a different shipping route, a different series of logistical nightmares endured by sailors so that aristocrats could say, "Look what arrived in last month's ship." You sample a candied orange peel. It's sweet with an undercurrent of bitterness, like eating philosophy. Someone praises it loudly. Someone else claims it pairs beautifully with port wine. You can't tell if they're correct, but you sip your wine anyway because your brain wants a moment of normalcy. The conversation at the table grows animated. Guests exchange travel anecdotes, though most of them have not travelled farther than the nearest fashionable market. They speak passionately about the Mediterranean, as though they've personally negotiated treaties there. They discuss figs, olives and lemons with the gravitas normally reserved for political debates. This is not a dessert course anymore. This is an edible resume. Every bite signals status, wealth, taste, literally and metaphorically. Imported delicacies are the Regency version of posting vacation photos online. Look what I have, each aristocrat silently proclaims. Look what arrived in my life from far away. Look how cultured I am. You chew politely, imagining the long, perilous journey your fig must have taken. The storms, the sailors, the barrels, the questionable storage temperatures. You feel a small pang of guilt for not enjoying it more. Then the final delicacy arrives, a platter of sugared violets, tiny purple petals crystallized until they resemble stained glass fragments. You place one on your tongue. It tastes like a flower that desperately wants to be candy but lacks the self-esteem to fully commit. You swallow, sip your wine, and exhale. You have survived the imported delicacies, but just as you start to relax, the candles dim slightly and the doors to the drawing room open. It's time for socializing. You are full. You are tired. You are 30% wine and 70% regret. And now you must make small talk. After the meal, everyone moves to the drawing room for tea, a calm, polite ritual that is also a battlefield of gossip and judgment. You rise from the table slowly, partly because you're attempting to maintain Regency poise, and partly because your body is processing 12 consecutive courses and several gallons of wine. Servants open the double doors to the drawing room, and the guests begin drifting inside like a herd of well-dressed ghosts seeking new terrain to haunt. The drawing room is warm and bright, filled with luxurious chairs strategically arranged to force eye contact. The scent of tea, delicate, floral, almost apologetically gentle, floats through the air, a mercy after the sensory assault of dinner. For a brief moment you think this might be peaceful. It will not be peaceful. A footman offers you a cup of tea so delicately balanced it looks like it might shatter if you exhale too hard. You thank him, clutch it carefully and take a sip. The tea is mild and soothing, a warm blanket wrapped around your bruised taste buds. But before you can fully relax, the murmurs begin. Tea service in the Regency era is not about tea. Tea is merely the medium through which social destruction flows. Ladies arrange themselves into tidy clusters, fanning out across embroidered sofas. Gentlemen hover in small groups near the fireplace, swirling their cups with the authority of men who believe tea is a moral compass. Every conversation begins with civility and ends with someone's reputation quietly stabbed through the heart. You try to appear inconspicuous, slipping into a chair near a potted plant that offers no real protection. The Duchess sits beside you, smiling serenely. Her smile says, "Isn't this lovely?" Her eyes say, "Observe carefully." Someone is about to be verbally dismembered. Across the room, Lady Pembroke compliments a woman's gown. Moments later, she whispers to her neighbour that the gown's colour makes the wearer look like a determined lemon. A gentleman near the fireplace recounts the scandal of someone's nephew eloping with a governess. Another laments that the price of tea has risen, again, because someone, somewhere, wants to make life difficult. Teacups clink, sugar spoons tinkle. The air fills with a polite orchestration of social warfare. You sip your tea, trying to follow the etiquette. Small sips, no slurping, no loud swallowing, absolutely no coughing. You must look engaged but not nosy. attentive but not overeager, present but not looming. It is a balancing act that requires more focus than your last year of school. Then, inevitably, someone asks you a question. So, a viscountess says, leaning in, "What did you think of the aspic?" Your blood runs cold. This is a trap, a social trap wrapped in gelatin. You must answer without insulting the cook, without revealing your trauma and without appearing uncultured. You smile gently, take a sip of tea for courage and say, "It was quite memorable." She beams. "Wasn't it just? You have chosen correctly, a small victory." Nearby, a group discusses the evening's fashions. Feathers, gowns, buttons, waistcoats, every detail is examined with forensic intensity. You watch, fascinated, as one woman manages to praise another's hairstyle, while simultaneously implying it is structurally unsound. Yet amid all the gossip, the tea itself remains dependable, warm, soft, kind, a liquid apology for everything you endured at the dining table. You sip again, settling into a moment of rare tranquility. But it doesn't last. A footman approaches with a tray of small pastries just when you thought your digestive system had reached capacity. You accept one out of habit. It is tiny, airy, innocent looking. You take a bite. Your stomach sighs in betrayal. As the conversation swirls on, you realize something important. This is the true climax of the evening. Not the calf's head, not the aspic, not the peacock resurrected with glue. This room, this tea service is where reputations rise, fall, or are gently nudged into social oblivion. You sit straighter, you sip slower, you listen carefully, because here, in the soft glow of candlelight, the real dinner begins. Now that dinner is over, your stomach realizes what has happened and begins protesting violently. You're one belch away from social ruin. It happens slowly at first, a little flutter, a gentle reminder from deep within that you have consumed 12 courses, 6 sauces, 3 varieties of questionable poultry, something gelatinous that probably counts as a science experiment, and enough wine to embalm a medium-sized ox. Your body, valiantly silent throughout the ordeal, has finally reached the end of its diplomatic patience. A small rumble echoes through your torso. You freeze. Here, in the elegant drawing room dripping with tea and gossip, your internal organs choose violence. You press a hand lightly to your midsection, as though you're soothing a startled animal. It does not help. Your stomach is staging a rebellion, dramatic, operatic, absolutely uninterested in Regency etiquette. Across the room, people sip tea with serene expressions. They nibble pastries with angelic calm. No one else appears to be engaged in gastrointestinal warfare. You, however, feel like a balloon inflated by a toddler with no sense of proportion. You shift slightly in your chair. Mistake. Your stomach responds with a seismic rumble so deep it feels like it might register on geological instruments. You take a sip of tea to pacify it. Another mistake. The hot liquid hits the roiling stew of jelly, wine, butter, bread, preserved lemons, olives, and roasted meats, creating a chemical reaction that can only be described as pre-eruption. You smile tightly at the Duchess beside you. She does not suspect that you are moments away from becoming a cautionary tale in Regency society. You inhale slowly. You exhale even slower. You attempt to will your body into stillness. But your insides are reenacting a battlefield scenario. Cavalry charging, cannons firing, drums pounding. Every burp must be swallowed whole, wrestled into submission, tucked politely back where it came from. You succeed once, twice. But each attempt becomes more precarious, more physically challenging, more emotionally devastating. Someone asks you a question. You cannot answer. You dare not open your mouth. You nod instead, hoping the nod communicates the appropriate level of agreement, enthusiasm, or moral support. You're not sure which emotion was required, but you can't risk sound right now. The Viscount across the room laughs loudly. You feel the vibration in your gut like a tuning fork. The laughter reverberates. Your stomach protests again. You cross your arms discreetly, hoping the pressure will keep all internal events on lockdown. A servant brings more pastries. You flail internally. No, absolutely not. Your digestive system is officially closed for the evening. It is barricaded. It has posted signs. It is not accepting new guests. Unfortunately, refusing food in the Regency era is suspicious. You take a pastry, hold it gently, and hope no one notices you are guarding it like a grenade with a pin halfway out. Your stomach swells further. A quiet panic rises. You scan the room. No open windows, no discreet corners, no escape route. Just a sea of polite faces and the oppressive weight of your meal settling into your bloodstream. Another rumble escapes. This one is soft, but not imaginary. You hold your breath. You pretend it was the chair. Yes, the chair. Chairs make sounds. Chairs have feelings. Chairs groan under the weight of history and roast beef. You shift again to sell the illusion. The chair obliges with a sympathetic creak. You are saved for now. But the worst is still ahead. Standing. At some point the evening must end, and standing up means rearranging everything inside you. Gravity will intervene. Pressure will shift. You may become a walking symphony of digestive regret. The host rises. Guests begin setting down their cups. It's time. You stand carefully, slowly, as though lifting a fragile antique filled with carbonated soup. For a moment, you stabilize. Nothing escapes. No burp, no groan, no audible tragedy. You breathe a sigh of relief. Huge mistake. Your stomach seizes the opportunity. You clamp your mouth shut, nod politely to the room, and pray the night ends mercifully soon. Because Regency dining isn't just a test of etiquette. It's a test of anatomy. Hours later, servants lay out trays of cold meats, biscuits, cheeses, and punch. You question everything, including your place in history. You had assumed, naively, that dinner had concluded. You had survived the soups, the heads, the jellies, the peacocks, the imported delicacies, the aggressively seasoned regrets. You endured the wine flood. You navigated the tea battlefield. You battled your own gastrointestinal demons. Surely the Regency evening was winding down. But no. A new wave of servants appears, sweeping into the drawing room like culinary spirits of the night, carrying trays piled high with light refreshments. The phrase is a lie. Nothing about this spread is light. The cold meats are thick, heavy slabs, slices of beef, ham, and something that looks like it died twice. The cheeses ooze with a faintly confrontational aroma. The biscuits are rock hard, possibly dual purpose as construction materials. You stare at the table, exhausted and spiritually compromised. Who are these people? Who eats again after 12 courses? How are they still standing? How do their stomachs have the audacity? Aristocrats flock to the trays with alarming enthusiasm. A baronet carves a slice of cold mutton with the energy of someone attacking a personal enemy. A viscountess plucks a biscuit off the tray as casually as breathing. A cluster of ladies hover near the cheese, discussing its texture as if they're appraising gemstones. You, meanwhile, are considering faking a faint to avoid participating. But refusing late-night refreshments is socially suspicious. These people judge. So you step forward and choose the smallest, least offensive-looking item, a biscuit the size of a small coin. It is crisp, very crisp. You take one bite and are rewarded with the sensation of chewing a lightly salted fossil. A servant appears with punch, bright, sweet, and smelling like alcohol wearing a fruit costume. You accept a cup automatically because at this point you are running on instinct rather than reason. One sip reveals that the punch is significantly stronger than it looks. It slides warmly down your throat, calming your panic and igniting a soft, fuzzy courage deep inside your chest. You can do this. You can survive the snacks. You can inhabit this strange, overfed century for just a little longer. Except the meats are calling to you. Specifically the cold beef. It glistens in the candlelight like a glossy brick. Someone insists you must try a slice. It's divine cold. You reluctantly accept. The slice is cold. It is beef. It tastes like the ghost of dinner returning to haunt you. You chew politely, praying your digestive system has forgiven you for earlier crimes. You wash it down with more punch, too much punch. The room warms, the cheese smells stronger, the biscuit feels heavier in your hand. The curtains sway slightly, not because of wind, but because you are gently listing to the side. You decide to sit. But sitting introduces new digestive negotiations. Your stomach is still precarious. The punch is settling in. The cheese is beginning to emit emotional energy. The cold meats feel like they're forming alliances. You close your eyes briefly and imagine being anywhere else. In bed, in the future, inside a quiet refrigerator. Guests, meanwhile, are invigorated. They chat, gossip, nibble and sip like professional nighttime snackers. One woman mentions she always eats before bed. You marvel at her bravery. You admire her stomach. It must be forged from Regency iron. As the night drags on, trays empty and refill in endless cycles. Footmen remain watchful. Candles burn low. Your body cycles through phases of surrender and determination. You take one last bite, cheese, daringly, and immediately regret it. Finally, the host announces that the hour grows late. You stand slowly, prayerfully, holding everything inside your body in place through sheer force of will. You have survived. The midnight snacks, the punch, the biscuit that nearly killed you. You have lived to see the end of the table, but the night is not yet over, because now you must leave politely. And Regency farewells? They take hours. You wake up feeling like you fought a duel with a pig. The aristocrats casually discuss doing it again that night. Your eyes open to a dull, throbbing awareness that your internal organs have unionized overnight. Your stomach, liver, and intestines are holding a protest march. Your tongue feels coated in a fine layer of regret. Your head is pulsing with the quiet, rhythmic ache of someone who consumed 6 different wines and one questionable punch made by a man who clearly measures ingredients emotionally, not mathematically. You try to sit up. You fail. Your body moves about as gracefully as leftover aspic. Your limbs feel gelatinous. Your ribs feel stuffed with mutton. Your spine is unsure of its role in society. The sunlight creeping through the curtains is offensively cheerful. Birds chirping outside sound like tiny creatures mocking you. Somewhere in the house, a footman walks briskly past your door, and the faint thud of his shoes rattles through your bones like distant cannon fire. You lie there, staring at the ceiling, replaying last night in disjointed fragments. The calf's head, the peacock cosplay, the bread asteroid, the aspic. Dear God, the aspic. You groan softly, partly from the memory, partly because your digestive system is currently reenacting the Battle of Waterloo. You attempt to stand again, this time succeeding in a slow-motion rise that would impress a zombie. As you get dressed, you realize Regency clothing was not designed for people experiencing gastrointestinal trauma. Stays, waistcoats, cravats, every garment squeezes with the merciless confidence of someone who believes you ate moderately and definitely did not consume a small farm's worth of animals. You finally make it downstairs, clinging to the banister for emotional support. The drawing room is already alive with chatter. Guests sit elegantly, hair perfectly coiffed, sipping morning chocolate as though they didn't spend last night shoveling hard biscuits and cold beef into their faces while trying not to explode. Lady Pembroke catches your eye and waves cheerfully. She looks radiant. You look like someone who survived a natural disaster. Wasn't last night delightful? She beams. Delightful. Yes, that's one word for it. You nod politely, careful not to move your head too fast in case your brain sloshes. A gentleman breezes past you, energized, humming a tune that suggests he did not consume 17,000 calories yesterday. He glances over his shoulder casually. We're doing it all again tonight, you know. Even more courses. Your soul briefly leaves your body. More courses? Your stomach tightens. Your spine stiffens in fear. Every cell in your body screams no. But outwardly you smile because Regency etiquette demands it. You murmur something like, "How splendid," while wondering whether it is socially acceptable to fake your own death. Footmen glide around, offering small morning snacks, fruit, bread, a dab of jam. The sight of anything edible sends a chill down your spine. You hold up a hand in quiet refusal. They nod sympathetically. They've seen your kind before, first-timers, survivors in the making. Meanwhile, the aristocrats discuss last night's dinner with fond nostalgia, as though it wasn't a complex conspiracy against the human digestive tract. They praise the sauces. They rave about the imported delicacies. They laugh about how light dessert was. You sip water. It is the only thing you trust. As you sit there, feeling your stomach make sounds that would frighten livestock, you realize something important. Regency aristocrats weren't just wealthy. They were indestructible. To endure such meals night after night requires internal fortitude bordering on superhuman. You respect them. You fear them. You understand now why so much of their art is portraits. They didn't have the energy for action scenes. You take another careful sip of water, breathe deeply, and remind yourself. You survived. And tonight, you will do it again, or you will perish gloriously. Either outcome is historically accurate. Finally, you come to understand that Regency dining wasn't about taste. It was about showing wealth, status, and your ability to survive horrendous menu choices without blinking. It takes time. Hours of chewing, sipping, nodding politely, praying quietly, but eventually the truth reveals itself. The Regency dinner table is not a culinary experience. It is not designed for pleasure. It is not engineered around flavour, nutritional value, or anyone's intestinal well-being. It is theatre. A grand, candlelit performance where every dish, every utensil, every wobbling aspic plays a symbolic role in a carefully choreographed social ritual. The point was never to enjoy the food. The point was to display that you could endure it. Because survival in the Regency world was currency. The turtle soup that tasted like scented pond water. It told your guests you had access to imported turtles, ice houses, shipping routes, and the money to waste on ingredients that actively disliked being eaten. The peacock dressed back up in its own feathers. A visual proclamation that your household could afford extravagance purely for the spectacle of it. The fact that the meat was dry enough to exfoliate your mouth was irrelevant. What mattered was that everyone knew you hadn't served chicken. The monstrous platters of meat, piled high like a protein mountain range. A statement that your estate had land, livestock, labour, and enough resources to feed the entire village, yet chose instead to feed a dozen aristocrats who would complain about the seasoning. Even the aspic, especially the aspic, served a social purpose. It demonstrated culinary sophistication, or at least a willingness to pretend to have it, access to gelatin extraction techniques, and a general disregard for the dining preferences of your guests. The imported delicacies, figs, olives, preserved lemons, were edible passports, proof that you or your suppliers were plugged into global trade, colonial networks, and exotic fantasies that involved hardship for everyone but the diners. Whether the food tasted good didn't matter. What mattered was that it arrived. And then there was the ice cream. A bowl of frozen elegance in a century without freezers wasn't dessert. It was a raised eyebrow at the entire natural world. Winter preserved until spring. Ice transported across counties. Cream, sugar, flavourings, all cold. This was the culinary equivalent of announcing, "I am wealthy enough to bully the laws of thermodynamics." Even the sheer length of the meal had cultural logic behind it. A long dinner demonstrated your ability to host, to provide endless courses, to employ a small army of footmen, cooks, scullery maids, and servers who moved like a silent organism. It also proved your guests had the stamina and the digestive systems to endure the evening without collapsing or embarrassing themselves, and you begin to see how every detail fits together. The overpowering perfumes weren't just scent, they were branding. The blinding array of forks wasn't just utensil confusion, it was a display of etiquette mastery. The late-night meat trays weren't a snack, they were a challenge to demonstrate resilience. Even the gossip-laced tea service was less socializing and more strategic posturing. Everything was performance. Everything was coded. Everything was absurdly, hilariously intentional. You realize now that Regency dining was a complex ritual of survival, bravado, and subtle warfare. You weren't just fed, you were tested, evaluated, judged on your grace under culinary pressure. Your ability to maintain composure while staring into the glassy eyes of a calf's had said more about your social worth than any conversation could, and somehow, despite the sauces that attacked you, the bread that injured you, the jellies that haunted you, and the meats that nearly staged a rebellion inside your ribcage, you made it. You didn't flinch, you didn't faint, you didn't commit a utensil crime, you survived a Regency dinner, and in this culture, that means something. It means you belong, at least for one night, to a world built on spectacle, symbolism, and glorious gastronomic madness. A servant offers you a glass of water so cloudy it looks like it has unresolved emotional trauma. Regency aristocrats avoided water like it was a tax collector with a clipboard, because half the time it was suspicious. You politely decline and sip more wine, because somehow that feels safer than whatever just winked at you from the bottom of the glass. You stare at the water, mildly horrified, wondering what life choices led you to this moment. The liquid is technically transparent, but in the same way a frosted window is technically a window. Something floats gently near the surface, a speck, a creature, a philosophical question. You decide you don't want to know. And now, at last, you understand why Regency society was permanently tipsy. They didn't drink alcohol because they were decadent. They drank alcohol because it didn't kill them. Water, on the other hand, was like a chaotic neutral entity. Sometimes harmless, sometimes dangerous, sometimes carrying enough bacteria to stage a revolution inside your digestive system. The aristocrats around you accept the glass without blinking, but not because they plan to drink it. Water is simply a decorative item in this era. Something told politely, maybe dab your fingers in, but never ingest. You watch Lady Pembroke lift her glass delicately, swirl it once, and set it down as though performing a ritual to appease the hydration spirits. A gentleman beside her mutters something about unfiltered well sources, which is Regency code for you might grow a second spine if you drink this. You nod solemnly, pretending you are absolutely aware of the water crisis before tonight and have not been relying on your 21st century immune system to get you through this century. You take another sip of wine, letting its warmth reassure you. Wine may have its own dangers, hangovers, questionable punch recipes, drunkenly agreeing to attend another dinner, but at least it doesn't look like it contains emotional residue. The servant who offered the water glides away, entirely unfazed, as though carrying around beverages of mild existential dread is part of the job. And it is. Regency households knew better than to trust water, and so they offered it with the same caution someone might display when presenting a live grenade. You remember the stories you've heard. People boiling water for safety, infusing it with herbs, adding wine or spirits to kill whatever lurked inside. Even tea became popular not just because it was delicious or fashionable, but because boiling things to death was one of the few reliable public health strategies available. Meanwhile, the aristocrats wield their wine glasses with smug confidence. Wine they understand. Wine they trust. Wine has been aged, clarified, fussed over by professionals. Wine does not hide things that move. You watch a viscount quietly pour his water into a potted plant. The plant wilts instantly. You blink. He blinks. Neither of you discusses it. Another lady uses her water glass to rinse her fingertips daintily. A genteel ritual designed to make everyone at the table forget this liquid might actually be a potion brewed by microbes. The water turns slightly murky, as if reacting to being touched by someone with high social rank. You pretend not to notice. A footman stands behind you, ready to refill your water glass the moment it dips below full. You protect it like a shield, gently pushing it further from your body as though it might grow legs. Your companions continue to chat about the upcoming ball, the latest scandal involving a carriage mishap, and a distant cousin rumoured to have invented a new napkin folding technique. You contribute politely while ensuring not a single droplet from that cursed glass approaches your mouth. Eventually, a servant clears the water away. You exhale in relief so profound your ribs loosen. The room seems brighter. Your soul returns to your body. You cradle your wine glass with renewed gratitude. In the Regency era, hydration wasn't a habit. It was a gamble. And tonight, you chose not to roll the dice. A large bowl of salad appears, consisting of limp leaves, vinegar strong enough to peel paint, and a few herbs arranged like they died heroically in battle. Regency aristocrats believed salad was cleansing. You take a bite and immediately feel like your tongue is being morally corrected. The bowl is passed toward you with genuine enthusiasm, as though the guests are offering salvation rather than greenery marinated in industrial-strength acid. You peer into the bowl, noting that the leaves appear to have been washed, dried, re-wetted, and then lightly crushed under a carriage wheel. The herbs, a sprig of parsley, a lone leaf of tarragon, and something unidentifiable, rest atop the pile like fallen soldiers waiting to be memorialized. You scoop a modest portion onto your plate. The dressing glistens ominously, a mixture of oil and vinegar in proportions that suggest the cook was briefly overtaken by religious fervour and decided everyone needed purification. A faint smell of pepper wafts up, but it is immediately overpowered by the vinegar's sharp tang, which could easily strip wallpaper in the right conditions. Across the room, a duchess takes a delicate bite and closes her eyes with reverence, as though receiving a message from a higher power. So cleansing, she murmurs. So balancing. You watch her for signs of physical distress, and see none. Astonishing. This must be the consequence of growing up on boiled vegetables and emotional repression. You take another bite, your mouth puckering instantly. The dressing assaults your taste buds with a ferocity normally reserved for scorned lovers. You sit up straighter, your sinuses clear, your posture improves. You experience a brief life review. You look down at the leaves. They stare back with the blank expression of vegetables that have gone beyond their natural lifespan. The oil coats your tongue like regret. The vinegar scolds you like a disappointed parent. You swallow, partly out of determination, partly because you fear what will happen if you don't. Regency diners adore salad, but not because it tastes good. Salad, in this era, is a statement. It says, I am refined, I am disciplined, I believe digestion requires punishment. A gentleman across the room declares that salad lightens the stomach after heavy meals. You consider how this could possibly be. True, your stomach is not light. Your stomach has been through a war. Your stomach is currently screaming into the void, asking why you introduced acidic lawn clippings into its already fragile ecosystem. The next bite is worse. The vinegar has intensified. It feels personal now, as if the salad has learned your weaknesses and is targeting them one by one. You hear someone praising the freshness of the leaves, which is confusing because these leaves appear to have been picked sometime during the late Bronze Age. You begin cutting the salad into smaller pieces to appear engaged, but your fork clinks against the plate, drawing the attention of a nearby footman. He stands at attention, waiting to see whether you intend to continue. You nod faintly, unwilling to be defeated by produce. Around you, the conversation shifts to the health benefits of raw greens. Aristocrats discuss digestion with remarkable confidence, despite having eaten 12 pounds of meat and cheese. Someone claims salad can fortify the humours. Someone else insists it corrects the bile. You're unsure whether your bile needs correcting, but if so, this salad is certainly attempting it. A lady across the room offers advice. The trick is to let the vinegar open your palate. Your palate is not opened. Your palate has filed a complaint. You push the leaves around, hoping to make it appear as though consumption has occurred. A leaf clings stubbornly to your fork. You remove it discreetly. It returns. You realize the salad is fighting back. Finally, mercifully, the footmen begin clearing plates. Guests murmur contentedly, praising the salad as if it were a gentle rain after a drought. You sit quietly, relieved the ordeal is over. But as your plate is lifted, you overhear someone mention the next and final element of the evening, the carriage ride home. And suddenly you realize your stomach is not done fighting. Instead of a modern plate, a servant hands you a thick slab of bread, your trencher. It's supposed to soak up sauces, but it's so dense it could be classified as geological. You poke it gently, unsure whether to eat it, use it, or defend yourself with it if the calf's head starts moving again. The trencher sits on the table like a prehistoric artifact, a bread relic forged in the fires of culinary necessity. Its surface is rough, uneven, and faintly suspicious. You tap it again, this time with the cautious curiosity of an archaeologist. It responds with a dull, echoing thud. You're not entirely convinced it's edible. You are, however, convinced it could stop a small musket ball. In theory, trenchers are simple, a slab of stale bread used as a plate to catch oils, stews, gravies, and sauces throughout a meal. In practice, it is the Regency version of multitasking, food that must also serve as dishware, sponge, napkin, and possibly weaponry during a surprise duel. The aristocrats receive their trenchers without hesitation. They've trained for this. They know how to angle the trencher so the juices pool instead of flood. They know how to tear off softened pieces politely. You watch the Duchess place her trencher with precise architectural intent, ensuring it sits at a perfect angle to receive incoming gravy. Your trencher, meanwhile, sits defiantly horizontal, refusing to cooperate. A footman ladles sauce onto your dinner, and the trencher reacts immediately. Instead of absorbing the liquid gracefully, it repels it, like water hitting waxed armour. The gravy skitters across the surface before settling into a small depression that looks geological in origin. You stare at it, unsure whether this is a flaw or a feature. You try tearing off a piece from the edge. It requires strength. Serious strength. You grip the bread, brace your elbow and pull. The crust resists. It fights. It holds fast with the stubborn determination of something that was baked at the dawn of civilization and has no intention of returning to dust. Finally it cracks free with a sound reminiscent of breaking kindling. You chew the piece slowly, cautiously. The flavour is mild, very mild. It tastes like ancient wheat and regret. But as the gravy begins to seep into the fibres, the trencher softens slightly, becoming something almost edible. Almost. Across from you, a gentleman praises the trencher system. It economises effort, he says, as though eating one's plate is the most logical advancement in human engineering. Another guest mentions that their household donates used trenchers to the poor, an admirable gesture, though you cannot imagine anyone consuming these willingly. As the meal continues, your trencher becomes a record of the evening, sauces layered like sedimentary rock, small chunks of meat embedded like fossils, droplets of broth forming miniature lakes. If a historian unearthed it centuries later, they could reconstruct the entire menu from its surface. A small disaster unfolds when a piece of roast rolls off your fork and lands squarely on the trencher. The bread barely reacts. It simply absorbs the impact like a seasoned warrior. You suspect it has seen worse. The Duchess notices your struggle and leans over slightly. The trick, she whispers, is to let the sauces soften it first. That way you can fold it into manageable bites. Fold it, like laundry. But she demonstrates with elegance, gently bending her trencher into a soft, sauce-filled cradle. You attempt the same, and miracle of miracles, your trencher complies. It becomes pliable, edible, almost pleasant. You take a bite. It's warm, flavourful, infused with the memories of everything you've eaten tonight. It's a strange combination of practicality and comfort. Humble bread transformed by the sheer power of Regency overindulgence. Still, you can't help noticing its durability. If someone were to shout bandits, you could fling this trencher like a discus and genuinely injure an attacker. As the servants begin clearing the table, you place your well-used trencher aside, unsure whether you respect it or fear it. You've eaten plates, fought bread, survived sauces, and somehow the night isn't even over. Because now comes the final test, the Regency carriage ride home. Once the meal ends, you think you're safe, but no. Guests gather for parlour games that feel like a cross between charades and psychological warfare. Someone suggests a word game about classical literature. You nod politely while internally screaming, hoping no one asks you to recite poetry after several glasses of Regency-strength punch. You follow the group into the drawing room, your limbs moving with the loose, jelly-like confidence of someone whose body has stopped sending status updates. A fire crackles gently in the grate. Chairs are arranged in a deceptively cosy circle, as though comfort is the goal here. It is not. This is a trap, a genteel arena. Ladies unfold fans, gentlemen smooth their waistcoats. Everyone sits with a suspiciously gleeful anticipation of people who know they are about to witness someone else's social demise. You lower yourself into a seat and pray your brain remembers basic language. The host claps his hands. "Shall we play literary association?" he announces, bright-eyed and absolutely malicious. Murmurs of approval ripple through the group. You feel sweat gather behind your knees. The rules are simple. One person names a classical author, the next must state one of their works, the next must describe a character, and so on until someone falters. The game continues until a victim collapses intellectually. Unfortunately, you are seated between the Duchess and a baronet who looks like he alphabetizes his book collection for fun. You are a lamb wedged between two highly educated wolves. The game begins. "Shakespeare," says Lady Pembroke. "Much ado about nothing," replies the baronet. "Beatrice," says the Duchess, effortlessly elegant. The circle tightens. Everyone leans in. Your turn is coming. You stare at your teacup, wondering if it would be socially acceptable to dive inside it head first. The gentleman next to you confidently names Milton. A woman responds with Paradise Lost. Someone else sees Lucifer. The baronet nods approvingly, clearly enjoying himself far too much. Your brain begins flipping through its limited Regency-era literary file cabinet, which contains exactly 3 items and a sticky note that reads, "Don't panic." But panic you do. Full-body panic. Your stomach shifts uneasily, still haunted by the salad, and you momentarily consider faking a faint to escape the imminent humiliation. Then, mercifully, the Duchess coughs lightly, and the host pauses the game to offer everyone more tea. You inhale sharply, buying yourself a few extra seconds of existence. Tea is poured, punch is replenished. A tray of sugared nuts appears. Guests nibble charmingly while your internal organs scream. A new game is suggested. This one is called the Minister's Cat. It is essentially an alphabetical adjective challenge involving felines. The Minister's Cat is affectionate, boisterous, cantankerous, and onward through the alphabet. You relax slightly. Surely this is easier. Surely this is safe. It is not. When the circle reaches you, you realize you have absolutely nothing starting with the letter J. Your mind is blank, utterly blank. You open your mouth and hear yourself say, "The minister's cat is joyful." The room pauses, then nods approvingly. You live another day. But the reprieve is brief. Next comes charades, which in Regency society is less of a game and more of a coordinated group hallucination. A baronet acts out the Iliad using only eyebrow movements. A lady pantomimes Queen Mab's chariot with such emotional intensity that you momentarily fear she's summoning spirits. You meanwhile attempt to act out a candle being extinguished and end up looking like someone swatting invisible bees. The group applauds politely. They always applaud politely. This is how they lull you into continuing. By the time the final game begins, a storytelling round where everyone must add a sentence, you're exhausted, overstimulated, and composed primarily of wine, fear, and protein. Your contribution to the story, and then the goose contemplated philosophy, earns a few raised eyebrows but is accepted into the narrative tapestry with grace. At last, mercifully, the game's end. Guests stretch, yawn charmingly, and remark on how delightful the evening has been. You smile thinly, knowing you have survived something far more dangerous than dinner itself. Regency small talk with rules. And now comes the final challenge. The carriage ride home, while your stomach, your nerves, and your dignity cling to life by a thread. The house goes quiet, the candles burn low, and the aristocrats retreat to their silk-curtained beds, where they immediately begin regretting every bite of turtle soup. You, too, lie awake, feeling your stomach negotiate hostage terms. Somewhere down the hall, a noble groans softly into the darkness, an age-old Regency lullaby. The stillness of the night settles around you, thick and heavy, a stark contrast to the chaotic symphony of dinner. But inside your body, a different symphony begins, one composed entirely of digestive regret. Your stomach shifts gently at first, like a disgruntled cat deciding whether to scratch the furniture or your intestines. Then it escalates, a rumble, a churn, a rolling wave of, "Why did you do this to me?" You lie very still, listening to the old wooden house breathe, floorboards settling, wind brushing the windows, faint embers crackling in the distant hearth. But beneath it all, more troubling sounds emerge, human suffering in stereo. A baronet in the next chamber turns over audibly, then turns over again, then makes a sound that can only be described as a man reconsidering his life choices. A lady in a room farther down releases a quiet whimper, delicate and dignified, as though even her indigestion must match her social rank. Someone else sighs loudly, an echoing hollow sound that carries through the corridors like a historical foghorn. This, you realise, is the true Regency nightlife. Aristocrats lying awake in fancy beds, wearing nightcaps worth more than your modern car, desperately hoping the turtle soup doesn't stage a coup. Your own digestive system is giving closing arguments. Every course you ate resurfaces in vivid detail, not physically, thankfully, but emotionally. The salad vinegar stings faintly along your memory. The mutton sits heavily, brooding in your chest. The aspic still haunts you spiritually. The peacock, it remains dry even in your imagination. You shift slightly, hoping to settle things. Your stomach, absolutely not. It rolls again, a slow, ominous motion, like a ship tipping before a storm. You try deep breathing. It helps until a bubble of trapped air surfaces and threatens to betray you. You swallow fast, attempting to force it down like a Regency scandal. The pressure lingers in your chest, a glowing ember of potential disgrace. You close your eyes, praying to whichever historical spirits oversee nighttime digestion. The mattress beneath you, though lush and stuffed with feathers, provides no comfort. It squeaks with every movement, broadcasting your struggle to the entire household. Even breathing feels dangerous, each inhale expanding your ribcage just enough to disturb the stew of fear and gravy inside. Then you hear it, a soft thump, followed by another groan, and then the unmistakable sound of someone slowly sitting up in bed, shifting their weight, and muttering curses into embroidered pillows. A duke, judging by the depth of tone. You imagine him clutching his abdomen, regretting not only the turtle soup but also every ancestral tradition that normalized it. His misery comforts you, not because you wish him ill, but because shared suffering builds community. You exhale shakily. This is normal. This is cultural. This is history, bonding people through mutual discomfort. A faint rustling follows, someone pacing, someone else opening a window, a third person whispering prayers or possibly bargaining with God. If I survive the night, I swear I'll never eat aspic again. Your own stomach settles slightly. Perhaps the worst has passed. Perhaps your body has decided mutiny is too exhausting. You let your eyes drift closed, though sleep remains cautious on the horizon. Just as you begin to relax, a bubble shifts suddenly within you, and your body issues a sharp internal warning. You freeze. Silence. Nothing happens. You're safe for now. But this is Regency midnight indigestion, and safety is always temporary. You curl deeper into the blankets, listening to the chorus of aristocratic suffering humming faintly through the hallways, a reminder that even the wealthiest, most powerful people in history were not immune to the consequences of bad culinary decisions. In the end, status means nothing. Turtle soup humbles all. And so tonight, as you drift towards sleep, let's take one last quiet look back at the culinary chaos you somehow survived. You endured turtle soup thick enough to patch a roof. You stared into the glassy eyes of a calf's head while pretending you still had dignity. You navigated forks, sauces, aspics, and wines, served faster than your modern digestive system can file complaints. You waged silent battles with jellied meats, weaponized bread, and aristocrats who genuinely thought reattaching peacock feathers to cooked poultry was normal human behavior. But beneath all the absurdity, the smells, the textures, the polite social panic, there's something oddly admirable about these Regency folks. They lived in a world without antibiotics, refrigeration, or the knowledge that gelatin should not wobble aggressively at the dinner table, and yet they feasted. They celebrated. They showed up in tiny slippers and stiff collars and pretended everything on their plate was perfectly fine, even when it absolutely wasn't. They tried. They adapted. They kept their pinkies up even while mentally negotiating a truce with a bowl of floating fish parts. And that strange resilience, that determination to find elegance in the absurd, is something worth honouring. Because no matter how uncomfortable or questionable their meals were, people kept gathering, laughing, gossiping, clinking glasses, and trying to make life feel a little grander than it really was. So tonight, as you tuck yourself into a clean bed, in a warm house, with plumbing, refrigeration, and dinner that didn't stare at you, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to the past. Thank you for surviving long enough to give us good stories and better recipes. Thank you for reminding us that history is equal parts gross, glorious, and completely ridiculous. Rest easy now. You're safe, warm, comfortable, and tomorrow, thankfully, no one is serving you jellied eel. Good night.